Hey everyone, Vince here, and this is the Ford Mustang GT V8, or as I like to call it, Ford's big middle finger to a world trying to go all electric. If you're an automobile fan, then the Mustang is something that needs very little introduction, or if any introduction at all, because it's one of the OG pony cars. It's an icon. It's an icon of that great time in the 1960s when this first emerged, when cars were sexy, made of heavy steel. You know, they were big, they were loud, they consumed a lot of gas. That's what this harkens onto. That era of it was just sexy to drive a really cool car. And the great thing about the Mustang is that it made it affordable to a lot of people. But the times have changed quite a bit since those glory days in the 1960s. You know, fuel prices are up, costs of living are going up, labor and all that, the cost of that all has gone up, materials. So everything's more expensive, and on top of that, car makers have to cram more safety, more technology. They have to be more mindful of things like the environment. Of course, we all should be. But the drive for electrification is kind of killing off a lot of these great cars from the past. But with the Mustang, well, apart from the Mustang Mach-E, well, this one, Ford says no. It's a big middle finger to all of that. We can do something great with the vehicle while doing a lot of also very eco-friendly things with a lot of our other vehicles. You know what? Let's pull over somewhere and I'll take you through this new Mustang. There are few cars that are as recognizable as the Mustang because it's been around for 60 years, 61 this year. Now, what they did for this new generation model, they made changes to the design. Of course, the front end, recognizable Mustang, but there seems to be more Audi-like touches with the front end. You can see it with the lights, the way they do the grille. You know, people kind of joke that it looks a bit more Audi, but Ford has been doing that inverted Superman grille up in front for quite a while now, and the interpretation in this one is actually pretty good. You have hood vents up here. What's nice are the wheels. I like the design of the wheels and the fact that it's in matte gray or matte black. It does have the Brembo brakes right there. Always fantastic for something of this power and this kind of size. And speaking of size, it hasn't really changed that much. Like, the measurements are pretty much the same overall. I mean, you do have the cabin pushback, the long hood, and the fastback-ish kind of rear. Although the fastback of this, it is a bit on the low side, the trunk lid there. But overall, still very recognizable. But the back, now this is something that a lot of people commented that it kind of looks a bit more Camaro, and I will probably agree. Because the way they do the lights now, Ford has been doing that for a while with the Mustang, but the impression the vehicle gives kind of seems a bit Camaro to me, but that's not exactly a bad thing. The Camaro is a fantastic looking car. One thing I did notice though, some of the panel gaps here, like for example here, the alignment of this is okay, but the alignment on this side is, the trunk lid is a bit high. So I think they need to work on the consistency overall with some of the parts of the vehicle, particularly with the panels. Even when I use my, my taper gauge on some of these, it's kind of inconsistent. So that's something they need to work on. Now let's pop the hood so we can show you what's at the heart of this thing. Now, under the hood is a 5-liter V8. Oh yeah, a proper 5-liter V8. It even has this vent here. And by the way, once we pop this hood, it is very much functional. So it does get in air there to give you a bit more, I don't know, a bit more venting there. But what's nice is the engine, the 5-liter V8, fills in the space very, very well. So it has 493 horsepower and 567 Newton meters of torque, a lot for this. But what we do find more interesting are the upgrades they made to the entire system, because Ford has had this engine for a while, but they have updated and upgraded it. First, you look at this. If you saw the older Mustangs with the 5-liter V8, it only had one throttle body. Now it has two. And of course, being that it has two, it has two filters as well. So it gives you a bit more response later when we drive it. I'll show you how. And then a bit more bracing up here. I mean, you do have the strut bar here. I mean, it's stamped metal, but it's pretty rigid. And the way it's reinforced with the firewall Also much appreciated for handling. Ford did make some changes, I think, with the steering of this, beefed up some stuff. But this one also gets the 10-speed automatic. Driving the rear wheels, it's not an all-wheel drive vehicle. And it should be quite a lot of fun once we take it out on the road. And being a Mustang with a 5-liter V8, it's going to be thirsty, but honestly, who cares? So we're now inside the new Ford Mustang, and the interior certainly has changed. They've leveled it up in so many different ways in terms of the design, in terms of the ergonomics. I mean, nice steering wheel here, shaped very much like a sporty steering wheel with the paddle shifters here, multiple buttons. The way they do the center console, very nice with that. Let's power up the car now because this is nice. Oh yeah. Being a Mustang V8, it does have that growl, and you feel it the moment you just press that ignition button. Just sets the tone very, very nicely. Now, again, like the gear selector here, it's the baseball style. It's PRND and manual mode, so you can use this. I mean, you can also override with the paddle shifters, but still, you can set it here and gives you maximum control. The handbrake is actually the different thing here, because if you notice, if you pull it up, it doesn't stay. You know, it just kind of, it's very heavy spring loaded. So it feels more like that e-brake that you would use for, let's say, rallying, that kind of thing, where you can pull it to get you a bit more angle when it comes to drifting. That's what this is for. I mean, they interpreted it nicely into a road car, which is the first time I've ever seen this kind of thing. Now, to pull up the handbrake, you pull this, and then it'll engage the handbrake. To disengage the handbrake, you push it down, and then it'll disengage there. But of course, we'll keep it engaged right now. This center armrest here is very nice. You know what? It kind of reminds me of some of the other, like the Nissans particularly, like the Juke and the way it's curved and all that. It does look good, feels good. You do have a compartment here. The seats, these are Recaro Sport seats. Again, very nice, holds you really well in place. Though for my liking, it's a little bit on the narrow side, but again, you know, that's just me. Glove compartment there, compartments on the doors. The trim they do on the door is actually very nice. If you look at the way they do the trim there, it's very good, feels very solid and very robust. This is a 4-seater, but it's more like a 2+2, because if you look at the back, it is quite tight. So you know, depending on the seating position or the height of the people here in the front, it's not going to be great for, you know, people sitting there in the back. Now, if you pull in closer, have a seat here, Barney, and then we'll pull in closer and look at the screens. So what's great about the Mustang is that you can adjust it, or you can set it up your way. So, and it all begins with the modes, and the modes are right here on the left side of the steering wheel. You do have the modes here. You do have your advanced safety features, the lane keep, the adaptive cruise control, and all that. But who cares about that right now? We're in a Mustang. What matters more are the modes. So if you point at the screen, so let's go through the modes now. You have normal, which is again what we use, sport, and you notice the graphics, this track mode, it changes every time, and it looks really cool. Speaking of drag strip, you do have the track apps that does give you the quarter-mile time, so you have to find a nice road for that allows you to do, you know, quarter-mile stuff. Slippery roads, and by the way, in track mode, it kind of disengages a lot of the safety features. Like, for example, the collision alert, and then you have the stability control gets disengaged there. But if you notice, the screen changes every time you change a mode. So for example, you go from, let's say, normal, the gauge cluster will look like this, right there, and then you go to, let's say, sport, it changes, gets a bit more modern. If anything, it'll remind me of a bit more of BMW. So the way it does that, and then you go into track mode, is where it has this mode, the bar, the digital bar. It kind of, it's something memorable for me because you know, my dad's car back in the day was a Mazda 626. It had a digital, like back in the 80s. It had this, and I miss that car, but it looks rather cool. Personally, what I like, you can set it individually if you press this button right here. So if you press this button here, you can set all of this depending on what you want. So like I said, You have track apps, acceleration timer, and all that if you want. Drift brake. We're not going to use that. I'd rather be in a controlled environment to try that out. You can set it to the auxiliary gauges or G meter, your oil pressure, your voltmeter right there. And then we can go back to, let's say, the custom modes, my color, but cluster theme. So you can set it to, like, when you change your modes, it'll adjust. Or you can go with the normal. You can select what you want right there. You can go to sport. You can go to track, calm, which is minimalist, right? Which is actually also quite nice. But what I like, I mean, this is actually something I enjoyed. The Fox body. So very old school type of Ford instrument cluster there. Rather nice. Now, back to this screen here. If you notice, this also has exhaust mode. So right now we are in track mode. So let's go back to, let's say, normal. You see here, this will change to normal exhaust, and then you can adjust it individually. So let me go to custom now, so I can adjust those individually of each other. So if I can, depending on what I want to have activated, I can go to the exhaust mode in this one. When you rev it, okay, pretty much standard. You can have it in silent mode, and then I rev it, it's a bit more muted. Sport mode, bit louder. You go to track mode, even louder. And the response when you go through the different modes here of the drive modes does get a bit quicker. Same with the suspension. By the way, this one does have the magnet ride suspension, meaning as you go through the different modes, it'll set the optimum setting for it to give you the performance that you need. And speaking of performance, you know what? Enough talk about the interior, because I'd rather just get to driving it, because this is a pretty fun car. So we're finally driving the Ford Mustang with a little bit more gusto. And the great thing about it is, for such a heavy vehicle, it is quite controlled when you're going around the bends. You know, it's not definitely like an 86 or even a Porsche in that sense. It is still big and heavy, but the way it controls itself, it stays composed around the corners, is quite remarkable for something this heavy. Because normally vehicles like this would lean a lot, you know, would be very, very like leery around the bends here. But this one, no. This one, you can really toss it around. So that's something great. You know, the Mustang from 2 generations ago, I drove it on this very same road, and it was leaning all over the place. So you kind of have to have your wits about. You have to be very careful when you're driving it. This one, the body control is just fantastic. You know, it's great. Like, again, when you're cornering here, let me show you. It stays flat. It stays flat, and that's really cool. However, there is something I want to point out here with the Mustang, and it's the steering feel, or the lack of steering feel. So it just doesn't tell you what the front tires are doing, how well they're loaded, or when it may suddenly start to skid off. Not that we're trying to go that fast, but it would be nice if there was a bit more feel to it when it comes to the steering. That is something I really want to point out. You know, you're not gonna get the same like steering communicativeness as, let's say, if you went for an 86 or that kind of car. That is something that the Mustang is not meant to be. To be careful. Then oh yeah. Oh! Yeah, brakes I think are something that they can really improve on with this one. I mean, it already has the Brembos, but the feel could definitely be improved. The initial bite, I want it to be a bit sharper. But you know what? One of the settings that I really like in this vehicle is when I tone it down a bit. You know, because, I mean, we're not going to be concerned with fuel economy of this, but if you're curious about the fuel economy, just under 5 kilometers per liter in city traffic, average speed of 18 kilometers per hour. But again, in a Mustang, who cares about that? All you want is this. All you want is that. That's the fun that you want with the Mustang. You don't buy this for doing groceries. I mean, I don't even know why I discussed the trunk space in this. This is something you want to drive and enjoy and have somebody next to you, which you know that you really enjoy being around with. That kind of thing. Your date. If you're also, let's say, arriving at home in your village at late at night, ask me how I know that. And then you don't want to wake up the neighbors, you can press the silence, the exhaust button there, and it's a lot more muted. Granted, you still have the growl from the engine, but it's not as, growly, I guess, raucous. It's not a riot. The ride is good, and also I like putting the steering into the comfort mode, because when you have it in comfort mode, it just is nice, nice and not super light. But I learned that setting from that time in the Nürburgring when I was talking to one of the pro drivers there. So he took us on a hot lap with a Hyundai Ioniq, and then he would turn everything off, stability control, traction control, and then like the maximum settings of the Sport, except for the steering. He would put it into comfort mode. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, it makes very much sense here in the Nürburgring because, we have so many corners and you want to save your arms. And, I'll take his advice for that. The more I drive the Ford Mustang GT, the more I think of Captain America. When he first woke up from that slumber in the ice for so many decades. That's what this kind of represents. Because this formula comes from a different time. Big car, sports car, pony car, with a big V8, very thirsty, very loud, and makes no apologies. It's just pure American power. And if anything, back then, it was the mainstream. Now it's like the rebellion. And I like that. That appeals to me. That it's Ford giving a big to the norms of today. Oh, sorry. Language. But that doesn't make it any less enjoyable. If anything, it's more enjoyable when you contrast it now to modern electric vehicles or even the hybrids. Now, when it comes to the price, it's 3.999 million. I think some of the other color options, you do have some other options, but it kind of brings up the price. But still, it is very, very affordable considering when it comes to the power that you get and the feeling of invincibility when you drive one of these around. No, it's not perfect, but it is very much still a Mustang and every bit as fun. This is Vince of AutoIndustriya. Thank you for watching. Let us know in the comments below what you think of the new Ford Mustang GT. Now, let's gas up, drive some more.